foolproof capacity, given our experience with Cyclone Sarai?
What do you mean by capacity?
How do we ensure?
In my language, there are different types of capacities.
I'm sorry. I mean to say what mitigating factors are we now taking for the long term?
Well, look, let me explain. If you go around the world, you will see overhead power lines in most countries. Even if you went to New Zealand or Australia, which are developed countries, you can see power lines which are overhead. Now, obviously, to construct power lines overhead is much cheaper than having them underground. Underground sometimes is not practical. For example, if you're crossing rivers and mountains and all that, how will you ever have the cables underground? Take, for example, our main transmission line that transports power from the two major hydropower stations in the middle of Viti Levu to the load centers in the west and Suva. Okay? You got this long transmission line, 142 kilometer transmission line. Now, if you go, I don't know whether you have had the opportunity to ever actually go through that transmission line, but it traverses one of the most hilly terrain in the country. So what I'm saying, that transmission line cannot be ever made underground. In fact, most high voltage transmission lines in most countries are all overhead. You can see all these steel towers when you go to Australia, New Zealand and everywhere. So the point I'm trying to make is this, that when you have a cyclone and you have overhead power lines, they're bound to get damaged depending on the ferocity of the cyclone.
Okay.
Because if it's overhead, it is exposed to nature. Of course, even if it's underground, it's exposed to nature. All you need is an earthquake.
That's true.
But just because we don't get earthquakes in Fiji, generally we don't talk too much about it. You understand?
Yes.
So, sometimes, like for example, after Cyclone Winston, when a lot of the EFL infrastructure was damaged, we took 6.5 months to repair those lines, People do forget that. Here, Cyclone Sarai, we are only into the third day and people are panicking. But but they say that was a Cyclone 5 and this is Cyclone 2 category. Mm-hmm. The process has to be followed, and which I will talk about more. Now, for example, the point I'm saying is that as long as you have overhead power lines, they're bound to get damaged depending on the strength of the cyclone and winds. Of course, even rain can damage power lines. We have had in the past substantial torrential rainfall, and you have had land slippages and power poles and steel towers have fallen over. So it depends on how strongly nature attacks us, the damages will result accordingly, the failures. So answering your question is, there is nothing like a foolproof system. Okay? Because in my opinion, there's nothing foolproof in this world. If nature decides that I'm gonna have a shot, I don't think there's anything foolproof in this world. But having said that, I'm not trying to be philosophical, I'm just trying to be practical. All I'm saying is, you can not have every circuit in the EFL system to be underground. It's very, very costly and in many cases impractical, as I said. Okay, that's the first point. So what we can do is, for example, in this particular case, there are a lot of people, who are coming out in the social media and elsewhere, and they're saying that EFL is taking too long. Now, what do you mean by too long? What is people's expectation? One day? They do not know the process that we follow. Let me explain. At the height of the cyclone, or prior to the cyclone, in the Western Division, we had already started to get substantial rainfall, especially Balutoka areas and Nandi areas. They had substantial rainfall before the actual winds came in. Okay? Now, as a result of substantial rainfall, we lost our transmission connection from Nandarivatu hydropower station to Vunda in the Western Division. And that brought about a power outage.
If I can just interject, when you say before the cyclone came, did you mean before any news of Sarai had arrived?
No. See, generally, for example, supposingly it's already raining, but it's not too windy, just light wind. People still think Sarai is away, although the impact has started to come. I'm talking about Friday afternoon, late afternoon. Okay, the real impact actually we felt when at night. Okay, so that's what I'm meaning. I'm saying prior to the cyclone, coming close to Fiji, because let's say Friday night about what time? 8 o'clock.
9, yeah.
It was hitting. 8, 9. It was really hitting, right? But then in the afternoon, in the western, Suva didn't have that rain till late in the afternoon. Suva started raining, I would say, at about. I remember going home at about 7. Even then, it hadn't started to sort of rain. But then after that, it started. But the Western Division had the rain from the afternoon. Okay? Now, as a result of that, our transmission line, I just quickly refer to a diagram so that when I speak to you, you understand what I'm talking. We have to understand the passes that we understand.